They checked in on a Friday night, but by Sunday morning, every door led to the same room. No windows opened, no exits worked, and something behind the walls had started whispering their names. Everyone knows that feeling of vacation bliss. The bags are dropped, the phone's on silent, and the world finally feels quiet. That's what Maya and Jordan were chasing when they booked a secluded Airbnb in the Pacific Northwest. An old hillside home, wrapped in fog, perched just outside a sleepy town most maps didn't even label. It looked charming in the listing. Vintage wood panels, antique chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows. A place with soul, the host had said in their description. But Maya would later tell her sister, it didn't feel like soul. It felt like the house was remembering something. They arrived just after dusk. The GPS lost signal 3 miles out, but they followed hand-drawn instructions the host had emailed. That should have been the first red flag, because by the time they parked, cell service was gone entirely. The house stood crooked on a slope, its dark wood exterior half-eaten by moss. There was no streetlight, no welcome note, just a brass key hanging from the mailbox, swaying on its hook, like it had been left there a very long time. Inside, the air was still, clean but aged. Every step echoed like the walls were hollow or listening. The living room had a fireplace, but no logs. The kitchen had cups, but no cutlery. And the bedrooms were identical. Same bed, same faded green wallpaper, same dusty, sealed windows. Jordan shrugged it off. Old house vibes, he said. Maya tried to agree, but before sleeping, she went back to the living room and noticed something odd. The front door didn't have a lock from the inside. Just a flat, brass surface. No bolt, no latch. The first night passed quietly, but the dreams didn't. Maya described it like this. She was floating in a hallway, barely lit, endless. All the doors looked the same, but one was slightly cracked open. Behind it, something breathed, slow and wet, as if it had lungs too big for its body. When she turned to run, the walls bent inward like the house itself was folding her in. She woke to find the bedroom light on. Neither of them had turned it on. The second day began to unravel. At breakfast, they opened every window and found none of them open more than an inch. Even stranger, the trees outside never moved. No birds, no wind, no sound. When Jordan stepped out the front door to get his bag from the car, he came back pale. Something's wrong, he whispered. The driveway was gone. The path they'd taken through the woods was now overgrown, like no one had walked it in years. The car was still there, but the forest had changed around it. Denser, almost artificial. They decided to pack up and leave. That's when they found the doors no longer led outside. The front door opened into a hallway they didn't recognize, lined with mirrors that weren't there before. The back door led to a room that looked like the kitchen, but the fridge was running, and they hadn't turned it on once since arriving. Every door led somewhere wrong. That night, they didn't sleep. The electricity flickered sporadically, and the overhead lights began to dim at odd intervals. One of the chandeliers swung gently on its own, though there was no breeze. At 3:12 a.m., Jordan tried a window with brute force. It cracked, but behind it was not the outside. It was another room identical to the one they were standing in. Maya checked her phone again. No service, but a new photo had appeared in her gallery. One she didn't take. It was of her sleeping, from a ceiling. They began marking doors with chalk. A simple X, just to keep track. But after walking the house in a loop, they returned to the first door, and the X was gone. Something was rewriting the house, resetting it. At one point, Jordan turned to say something, then froze mid-sentence. His eyes stared past Maya, toward a shadow at the end of the hallway. Tall, still, but not human. They backed into a room and locked the door. Only this time there was a lock. A brand new latch that hadn't been there before. They bolted it without thinking. Inside, they waited. Hours passed. No footsteps. Just soft whispering from the other side of the door. Not words. Just syllables mimicking their names and getting the pronunciation wrong. Like a tongue not used to speaking. At dawn, something changed. The mirrors in the hallway began to fog. Not from heat, but breath. Maya saw it first. Dozens of them aligned across the walls. Each one fogging in rhythm. Inhale, exhale like someone or something was standing on the other side. They smashed one mirror. Behind it was not a wall, but an eye. Gigantic, bloodless, unblinking. That's when they realized the house wasn't haunted. It was alive. The host responded to their final message 3 days later. Just a casual reply. So sorry. Had some Wi-Fi issues. Hope you too enjoyed the piece, and quiet smiling face with smiling eyes. Let us know if you want to book again. 2 months later, the listing disappeared. But locals say the house is still there. Still watching. Still changing. One hiker claims he found a window frame nailed to a tree miles away. Inside was a reflection of a girl sleeping. She looked familiar. It was Maya, but the woods had no house. No structure. Just forest and silence. Like the house had moved on. Or worse, had never needed a foundation to begin with. It was peaceful weekend. A simple cabin rental in a sleepy lakeside town just north of the border. Quiet, empty roads, pine trees brushing against the sky, and a mirror-like lake that seemed untouched by time. The kind of place where people go to escape the noise. But sometimes the silence has a sound of its own. The couple, let's call them Rachel and Dean, had been dating for 3 years. This trip was meant to reset things. Work stress, screen time, city living, it was all catching up. So, for the long weekend, they drove 6 hours into the woods, chasing that old idea of serenity. They reached the cabin by early afternoon. Rustic but well-kept, with a long wooden dock that stretched into the lake like a reaching arm. The water was impossibly calm. It reflected the sky so perfectly it was hard to tell where the world ended and the water began. But there was something strange about that lake. Something too perfect. Rachel noticed it first, how the trees around it seemed to stop short, as if leaning away from the water, as if repelled. The bird's song, so vibrant in the forest, faded to silence near the shore. Dean shrugged it off. It's nature, he said. Sometimes it's just like that. But Rachel felt something she couldn't explain, like the lake was holding a secret and watching. That night, after dinner, they sat on the porch in the dark, sipping wine, the dock lit only by the full moon. That's when Dean thought he saw something. Just a small ripple. A disturbance in the otherwise flawless reflection. He squinted. There's something out there, he said. Rachel looked, but saw nothing. No wind. No fish jumping. No ducks. Just that one ripple. It seemed small at first, insignificant, but it returned again, and again, always from the same spot, dead center of the lake. Rachel joked that it was probably a turtle. Dean agreed, but neither of them laughed. The next morning, Rachel woke before Dean and went to the dock to clear her head. Morning mist hovered above the water, making the lake look more like glass than liquid. She stood there for a while, watching her reflection. Then, behind her, in the water's reflection, something moved. But when she turned around, nothing was there. No wind, no sound, just that same uneasy silence. And then she noticed the ripple. Not a splash, not a wave, just a single widening circle forming from the middle again, as though something just beneath the surface had exhaled. She backed away, slowly, and that's when she realized something else. Her reflection wasn't moving. She blinked, moved her head. Still, the reflection stared straight ahead, unblinking, unchanging, eyes fixed on the lake. Rachel ran back inside. By the time Dean woke up, she had convinced herself it was exhaustion. Maybe the altitude, maybe the wine, but something inside her had shifted. That night, it escalated. Around 2 a.m., they heard a sound. A soft slap, like wet cloth hitting wood. Then again, and again. Dean got up and looked through the curtain. There's someone on the dock. Rachel froze. But when they stepped out with a flashlight, there was nothing. Just droplets. A trail of wet footprints leading from the end of the dock to the shore. But here's where it gets stranger. The footprints weren't headed toward the cabin. They were heading back into the water. Dean tried to rationalize. Maybe someone was swimming. In the middle of the night, Rachel said, without a car, no one else is around. They tried to sleep after that. They locked the doors, pulled the curtains, and buried their heads under the blankets like children hiding from the monster under the bed. But you can't unsee something like that. You can't unfeel it. The next day was worse. The dock felt wrong. The air around the water was heavy, humid, metallic. They packed early, but as they started loading the car, Dean realized the car key was missing. They tore the cabin apart, checked bags, drawers, pockets, nothing. Then Rachel saw it. The key was on the end of the dock, lying on the wood, as if placed there deliberately. She didn't want to walk down. Neither did Dean. But what choice did they have? As Dean stepped forward to grab it, Rachel watched him carefully, and then she saw it again. Behind him, in the lake, the reflection of a figure standing beside him, tall, thin, still. But when she looked up, no one was there. Just Dean, just the lake, and that unnatural reflection. Rachel screamed. Dean turned, panicked. But again, nothing. They left minutes later, key in hand, tires skidding on gravel, hearts pounding in their ears. Back home, things seemed to return to normal, mostly, but something followed them. Not literally, not physically, but emotionally, like a shadow that clings to the edge of your memory. The silence in their apartment felt heavier now. Mirrors gave them pause. Water made them uneasy. Dean started having nightmares, waking up drenched, gasping, muttering about something under the surface. And Rachel noticed something subtle. Anytime she took a bath or filled the sink, there'd be a ripple. Always just one. Always in the center. Even when the water was still. Even when she was alone. They tried to ignore it. But the fear wasn't about what they saw. It was about what it meant. The lake didn't want to hurt them. It wanted to be seen. It wanted them to know that some things can wait forever. Some things beneath the surface are always watching. Patient. Silent. Like a reflection that never quite matches. Like still water that's never really still. It was supposed to be a simple road trip. 3 friends, Nina, Marcus, and Jules, headed west for a spontaneous escape from their buzzing city lives. The plan was loose: drive, camp, and see what the desert had to offer. But plans tend to fall apart when something else is waiting for you in the middle of nowhere. They had been driving for hours, deeper into the scorched stillness of Nevada. As the sun began to dip, Nina pointed out a blinking sign in the distance. Silver Rest Motel, vacancy. Just 6 rooms, a rusting neon cactus, and not another building in sight. The kind of place you only find on roads that stopped being important a long time ago. Inside the lobby, there was no one behind the counter. Just a dusty bell, and a strange ticking coming from an old wall clock that hadn't moved in years. Marcus rang the bell twice. No answer. On the 3rd ring, a man emerged from a side door. Mid-50s, eyes glassy, smile too wide. He didn't ask their names, just slid a key across the counter. Room 4. That should have been the first red flag. But the trio was too tired to question it. Room 4 was off. The air inside was cold, unnaturally cold considering the desert heat outside. No AC, no fan, yet the air pressed against their skin like ice. The windows wouldn't open, and the lock on the door was broken. Jules joked it looked like someone had tried to get out. They chalked it up to cheap maintenance. Drop their bags, turn on a lamp, and try to unwind. But the light flickered constantly, and every so often, they all heard something beneath the floor, like dragging feet in slow circles. They were on the ground floor. There was no basement. At 1:23 a.m., Nina woke up first. The television, an old boxy thing they hadn't touched, was on. Static blared, and the image was distorted, flickering between the static and something that looked like a hallway. Not their hallway. A hallway with peeling wallpaper, wet footprints, and someone standing at the end, facing away. Marcus unplugged the TV, but the image stayed for another 6 seconds. Then it turned off on its own. None of them slept that night. Every time they closed their eyes, they felt like someone was standing over them. Not watching, just waiting. At dawn, they decided to leave. But the front door wouldn't open. They twisted the knob until it nearly broke. The windows, too, were sealed. From the outside. That's when Jules noticed something strange. Room 4's door had a metal bar drilled into the floorboards. Not a lock, more like a bracing clamp. As if it wasn't designed to keep people out. It was meant to keep people in. They began to panic. Phones didn't work. No signal. No Wi-Fi. Nina opened the dresser drawers looking for anything that might help, and found a leather-bound guest book. Only one name was scribbled on the last page. Don't look at the mirror. They hadn't even noticed the mirror. An old, full-length piece covered by a dusty sheet, as if whoever stayed before them had deliberately hidden it. But curiosity wins where fear hesitates. Jules pulled the sheet down. The mirror showed the room, same beds, same flickering lamp, but the reflection was off. Nina and Marcus stood in place, just like in reality. But Jules's reflection was smiling. He wasn't. Behind Jules, something stood in the reflection. Tall, colorless, just there like it had always been. But when they turned around, the room was empty. The mirror cracked, and then the dragging sound beneath the floorboards stopped. They waited, frozen, for a minute, two. Then the television turned on again, this time with no static, just the image of room 4. But instead of the 3 of them, the screen showed a different group, 2 men, 1 woman, standing in the same place. Same expressions, same fear. Then one by one they faded, like old film burning away, and the screen cut to black. The friends looked at each other. Marcus said what they were all thinking. I think this motel remembers people. At exactly 2 p.m., the door unlatched on its own. They didn't question it, just grabbed their things and left. The lobby was empty. The man at the counter was gone. Outside, the desert sun was brutal again. Cars passed on the highway as if nothing had happened. But as they drove off, they saw it. Behind the motel, rows of makeshift headstones. Some marked, some not, all with familiar names. The most recent one read, Room 4. Jules pending. They never found the motel on any map again. The GPS log from their trip erased itself. The photos they'd taken the night before were blank. White static, except for one. A blurry photo of the cracked mirror. And standing behind them, barely visible, was a 4th figure. Something tall, colorless, and smiling. It began as a dream vacation for Rachel and her husband Daniel. A 2-week luxury cruise through the Caribbean. Endless buffets, sun-drenched decks, midnight dances under the stars. Everything they needed to unwind from a year that had left them frayed and exhausted. But by the second night, things started to feel off. It wasn't the sea. The waters were calm. The crew was polite. But Rachel noticed him during the captain's welcome party. A man standing near the edge of the room, untouched by the light, dressed in clothes that seemed outdated, crumpled, like he hadn't changed in days. He didn't speak to anyone. He just stared. She told herself he was probably a shy passenger. But there was something about his expression of vacant intensity, like he was watching for something. Or someone. When she glanced back, he was gone. Over the next few days, Rachel saw him again and again. In the hallway by the pool deck. Standing silently near the elevator as the doors slid open. Once, even at the far end of the dining hall, just standing behind a partition, facing the wall. Every time she tried to point him out to Daniel, he was gone. Not hurried, not hiding, just not there anymore. The ship's manifest listed every guest, but when she asked casually at reception how many passengers were on board, the crew always gave the same answer, 1,428. The exact number. No more, no less. But that man made it 1,429. On the 4th night, she decided to confront him. She followed him down a quiet hallway late at night. The corridor was dimly lit, lined with numbered doors, all identical. No music, no voices. Just the distant hum of the ship's engines. He turned a corner, and when she followed, he was gone. But the hallway he turned into wasn't like the others. It had no lighting, just a faint emergency glow at the end. And the rooms weren't numbered. They were blank. She turned around quickly, heart pounding, only to find the hallway behind her had changed. It was shorter, narrower, the lights dimmer. When she made it back to her cabin, she was pale and silent. Daniel asked what happened, but she brushed it off. She barely slept that night, but she wasn't the only one. The next morning, the ship's crew was on edge. Passengers were murmuring. Rumors spread like fire. A woman in cabin 812 had vanished. Not left the ship, vanished. Her belongings untouched. Her keycard inside the room. No sign of a struggle. No futi. Nothing. The captain assured everyone it was being investigated internally. That phrase was repeated like a script. Cold. Hollow. And that night, Rachel saw the man again. This time, standing at the top of the grand staircase. He looked at her, just for a second, and smiled. She described him to the crew, but no one recognized him. No one had seen him. No one with that description was on the ship's registry. By day 7, 2 more people were missing. The mood aboard turned grim. Deck chairs were half empty. Shows were canceled. A strange stillness settled over the ship, like something just beneath the surface was watching, waiting. Rachel began looking into the ship itself, its history, and what she found was a whisper that chilled her. This wasn't the ship's first voyage. But on its 3rd run, 5 years earlier, there had been a fire. A passenger died, a man who'd been traveling alone. No ID, no family. He was listed only as unconfirmed male, unknown origin. The body was never recovered. The strange part? That man had boarded with no record. Just appeared on the ship. Just like now. She dug deeper into old maritime logs, forums, and archived news articles. They all said the same thing. An unexplained passenger. A ship-wide unease. People vanishing. Some believed it was a ghost. Others, a cursed spirit, doomed to roam the ship until someone noticed. Or worse, until someone took his place. Rachel tried to piece it together. The missing guests. The rooms with no numbers. The hallway that didn't match the ship's blueprint. She realized something terrifying. This man, this presence, wasn't just haunting the ship. He was part of it. Not a passenger. Not a ghost. But something older. Something that had become embedded into the ship's memory, like a glitch in the steel, repeating itself across time. And every time he was noticed, someone else vanished. By day 10, more people were reporting things. Seeing figures in the distance. Feeling watched. Cold spots in their rooms. Doors closing on their own. The ship's crew said it was humidity, a quirk of older vessels. But it wasn't. Rachel's final encounter came on the 11th night. She woke around 3 a.m. to the sound of their cabin door unlocking. Daniel was asleep. The lights flickered. She sat up slowly, and there he was, standing in the doorway, half shrouded in shadow. Water dripping from his fingertips, pooling on the floor. His expression was blank, like he didn't know who he was anymore. Or maybe he never did. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He didn't come closer. He just pointed to the hallway, to the place with no numbers. The next morning, the hallway didn't exist. She looked for it, asked crew members. They told her no such corridor was ever part of the ship. On the final day of the cruise, as passengers prepared to disembark, the crew made an announcement. Another guest had disappeared during the night. Daniel. Rachel screamed, demanded answers, but no one remembered seeing him after dinner. The room had been empty when they entered. No signs of him anywhere, not even on the surveillance footage. And then she remembered. The man didn't want her. He wanted someone else to take his place. Daniel had noticed him too. Once. Briefly. That was all it took. Rachel was escorted off the ship, hysterical. The official story claimed her husband had never boarded, that there had only ever been one name under that reservation. Rachel's name. The ship sailed again 2 weeks later. A new group of guests. A new set of cheerful brochures. 1,428 passengers. Again, just like always. But if you listen carefully on quiet nights at sea, you might hear footsteps in the hallway no one remembers. Or see a figure standing on the top deck, staring into the dark ocean, waiting for someone to see him, so he can finally belong again. In the summer of 2017, for college friends, Eli, Karina, Max, and Deja rented a small catamaran in the South Pacific. It was a celebration trip after graduation. The plan was simple. Spend 2 weeks island hopping, disconnecting from technology, chasing sunsets, and capturing Polaroids. No cell service. No schedule. Just the ocean and each other. On the 3rd day, they lost their GPS signal. It wasn't a dramatic storm or a massive mechanical failure. Just a quiet blinking red light on their satellite tracker. The wind was calm, skies were clear, but something felt off. According to Max, who had sailing experience, They should have been close to an uninhabited island called Motutunga. But instead, they spotted a different landmass entirely. Smaller, heavily forested, with what appeared to be structures on it. Old, broken, and strangely symmetrical. Almost like a forgotten settlement. But there was no record of it on their map. That's when the clock stopped. Literally. Karina's analog wristwatch, one she wore daily, froze at exactly 3:17 p.m. Deja's phone, even though it was on airplane mode and fully charged, blacked out. The catamaran's dashboard clock glitched and began to count backwards. Eli laughed it off. Electromagnetic interference, he joked. But no one else was smiling. Still, curiosity won out. They anchored, rowed to shore, and stepped onto the island. They wouldn't find the catamaran again. The island was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind brushing through the trees. Just the crunch of their footsteps against gravel paths that seemed man-made, designed, not natural. As they explored, they found remnants of buildings overtaken by vines and moss. A rusted bell tower, empty homes, a single stone statue in the center of the village, its features worn down to an expressionless blur. But something else stood out. Everything on the island was perfectly still. Leaves didn't sway. Shadows didn't move. And most disturbingly, they couldn't find the sun's direction. It was light out, yes, but the light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the sky was lit artificially or trapped in perpetual noon. Max took dozens of photos on his analog camera, but when he clicked through them later, they were all blank. Just solid gray. No light, no dark, no forms, just nothing. It was like the island swallowed the very concept of image, or memory. That night, they made camp inland, near what looked like an old schoolhouse. They tried to laugh, to shake it off, but sleep didn't come. Instead, they began to experience what Deja described as time hiccups. You'd blink, and hours would pass. You'd sit to tie your shoe, and look up to see nightfall. No one could explain it. Time was unraveling, but only for them. Or maybe time had stopped, and they were unraveling. The second day, they found writing, carved into the inside walls of a crumbling stone building, in frantic, jagged script. Dozens of lines repeating the same phrase. We're the clocks now. We're the clocks now. We're the clocks now. And beneath it, something stranger. To look at the sea is to forget. To remember is to vanish. That night, Eli disappeared. There was no sound, no struggle, just silence. He'd walked a few yards away to use the bathroom near the trees. But when Karina went to check on him 5 minutes later, he was gone. No footprints, no trace, just his flashlight, still turned on, placed gently on a rock. Panic set in. Karina insisted they leave the island immediately. But the shoreline was no longer the same. Where their dinghy had been, only sand remained, and the tree-line had shifted. Landmarks they remembered were no longer there. Ja, trying to stay calm, led the group back to the stone statue in the village center. That's when they saw it. The statue was no longer faceless. It had a mouth now, and eyes. Deep, sunken, human-like eyes that hadn't been there the day before. The moss had peeled away, or maybe it had grown into the new form. But worse, it looked like Eli. The angle of the jaw, the crooked smile, even the chipped molar on the left side, just like Eli's. They didn't sleep after that. On the third day, Karina started talking in loops. She'd speak a full sentence, then repeat it word for word, with no memory of having said it. We need to go back to the boat, she'd whisper. Then pause, then repeat it again, and again. Her eyes became glassy, distant. Max tried to shake her out of it, yelling, begging, but she didn't respond. Then she simply walked into the ocean. Max ran after her, but by the time he reached the shore, she was already too far out, and the water was strangely still. No ripples, no sound. It was like she was walking into a painting, a perfectly flat, dead ocean. She never resurfaced. Now it was just Max and Deja. They stopped talking. Words felt heavy, like they were pulling something toward them with every sentence. Instead, they stayed silent, kept moving, kept trying to retrace their steps. But the island changed as they walked. Trees that were once behind them would appear ahead. They'd pass a building, then pass it again minutes later. It was a loop, a maze with no exit, and all the while, the statue kept changing. Now it had Karina's eyes, and her watch, rusted and stuck at 3:17, embedded in its chest. That's when Deja started hearing things. A soft ticking, not mechanical, but organic, like a heartbeat trying to imitate a clock. Max didn't hear it, but Deja said it was coming from under the ground. And every time she closed her eyes, she saw Eli's face, but frozen mid-scream. Mouth open, no sound, no air, just the image stuck in her brain like a photo that wouldn't fade. Max vanished the next morning. His backpack was still there. His camera too. And inside the camera bag were Polaroids, but not the blank gray ones. These were new, developed, clear, crisp, all photos of the island, but from above. Aerial shots, like drone footage but distorted. The village, the statue, the paths. Deja flipped through them, and on the last one she saw herself, standing alone in the clearing, looking up, except she hadn't taken that picture. She burned the photos that night. Deja doesn't remember how she left. The next thing she remembers is waking up in a fishing boat with 3 strangers pulling her aboard. They'd seen smoke. Said she was on a beach screaming. Alone. The Coast Guard never found the island, despite returning to the exact GPS coordinates. There was no record of any landmass there. Nothing on satellite. Nothing on maritime charts. She tried to explain what happened, but her story fractured. Pieces vanished every time she told it. Dates wouldn't match. Names slipped away. Eventually, she stopped talking. She now lives alone, never near the coast. And every night at 3:17 p.m., all her clocks stop. They say if you pass a hitchhiker 3 times on the same stretch of road, you've already taken them with you, whether you know it or not. That's what happened to us on a coal mountain road when we didn't stop. But somehow he still got in. It was late November, just before the first real snow hit the Appalachian backroads. My friends and I, Jordan, Reese, and Miles, had finished a weekend trip in Asheville. We were heading home, cutting through one of those narrow forest highways that twist like they're trying to shake you off the road. No signal, no lights, just fog rolling like a slow breath over the trees. That's when we saw him, the hitchhiker. He stood on the side of the road with his thumb out, hunched slightly, wearing what looked like a navy coat, one that had seen too many winters. His face was down. We couldn't see his features, just wet hair clinging to his forehead and a duffel bag resting against his boot. Reese was driving. He slowed down. Miles muttered, "Nope, keep going." And we did. We didn't talk about it after that. Not until 10 minutes later when we saw him again. Same guy, same coat, same wet hair and duffel bag, standing in the exact same pose just ahead of us. We all fell silent. There was no way. We hadn't taken any turns. The road was straight. No chance he passed us. But there he was, thumbing a ride again. This time, Reese didn't slow. We drove past faster. Jordan tried to laugh it off, saying maybe it was a twin prank or someone playing tricks on hikers. But no one believed that. Then 15 minutes later, we saw him a third time. Same man, same spot, as if time had snapped back and reset. Only this time, he looked up, and that's when I saw his face. His skin was pale, too pale, like the blood had given up trying. His eyes looked straight at me through the foggy glass. Not angry, not pleading, just knowing. And then he smiled. Not a grin, not a happy smile. A slow, curling acknowledgement, like he was waiting, like he was already in on it. I didn't say anything. I just locked the doors. I couldn't explain why. Instinct, maybe, but something about that smile made me feel like he'd already chosen us. Not the other way around. That night, we made it to a cheap roadside motel, last available room before the highway split. We were shaken, but trying to forget. Reese kept swearing he saw headlights behind us the whole drive, even though we hadn't passed a single other car. Miles joked it was our ghostly friend, and we all half laughed. But nobody looked each other in the eyes. The room was small. 2 beds. 1 pull-out couch. Reese and I shared 1 bed. Jordan took the other. Miles drew the short straw and got the couch. Around 3:20 a.m., I woke up. I didn't know why. The kind of wake-up where your body knows something before your mind does. The heater had gone off. Room was freezing. Quiet. I thought maybe Miles was up going to the bathroom, but the light was off. I looked over. He was still on the couch. Still. Then something moved in the corner. Not big, just enough to shift the dark. It was a shape, a figure, standing, facing the wall. I froze. I thought maybe it was one of the others, disoriented, maybe sleepwalking. But then my eyes adjusted. The figure was too tall, taller than any of us. The coat it wore looked soaked, even though we hadn't seen rain in hours. And then it turned. I didn't see a face, just a blur of something too wrong to describe. Not monstrous, just unfinished, like the face was struggling to stay real. And in that moment, something deep inside me, the primitive part, knew this thing had never been alive. Not like us. It just wanted to be. I shut my eyes, and when I opened them, it was gone. The next morning, none of us said anything, but the tension had tripled. Jordan looked like he hadn't slept. Reese kept asking if we had left the car windows open. He said the inside smelled like lake water. Then Miles said it. He looked pale, arms folded, eyes darting. I saw him in a mirror, he whispered. Last night, in the bathroom, behind me. He swore it wasn't a dream. Said he felt the cold just before the lights flickered and the mirror fogged up without any steam. And in the fog, the man's face appeared. Not a reflection, a face inside the mirror. Watching. When he turned, no one was there. It got worse after that. We started hearing dripping in the car, even when nothing was wet. Reese's rearview mirror wouldn't adjust, kept tilting on its own. Jordan said he kept having dreams of walking down the road and seeing him again. But every time he passed a man, he'd turn around and he'd be closer, like the space was folding in. I started noticing the smell, not just in the car, in the motel, on my clothes. Faint but wrong, like river silt and something old. We agreed to get home as fast as possible, but the road kept dragging. Miles even checked GPS and swore we should have been an hour further than we were, like the road was looping us. We saw him once more, this time at a distance, standing beside a mile marker. No thumb out, just standing there, watching and smiling. Later, I looked up the road. I needed answers, anything to explain what happened. There's a story, an old urban legend, not well known, but documented in a few Appalachian ghost forums. They call it the passenger you denied. The legend says if you drive past a certain type of hitchhiker, one who wasn't ever real to begin with, and you see him more than once, you've already invited him. Not into your car, but into your path, your direction, your timeline. He doesn't need a seat. He just needs acknowledgement. That's why they say, never make eye contact. Never look back. Never joke about it. Because that's the trap. The moment you recognize him, you carry him. We made it home eventually, but nothing has felt normal since. Miles moved cities. Jordan deleted all his road trip photos. Reese refuses to drive back roads. As for me, I haven't seen him again. Not yet. But some nights when I'm at a red light, I catch movement in the rearview mirror. And once, just once, I swear I smelled lake water. And maybe that's how it works. He doesn't need a destination. Only passengers who didn't pick him up, but took him with them anyway. They say if you hear voices beneath your floorboards, you should never answer back. Because the second you do, you're not living alone anymore. It was supposed to be a simple retreat, a solitary weekend in an old mountain cabin, far from traffic, from noise, from everything that felt like pressure back in the city. The kind of place where people go to reconnect with silence. Alex rented it cheap. Too cheap, really. The listing called it rustic, but the photos looked clean. One bedroom, a fireplace, and a wraparound porch swallowed by trees. What the ad didn't mention was that the cabin used to be 2 stories, until the bottom floor was sealed shut. Alex didn't notice it right away. The outside looked normal, but the interior told a different story. There were stairs right in the middle of the living room, but they led straight into a wall. Drywall, nailed in hastily. No saini, no explicación. Just a staircase that shouldn't exist anymore. He thought maybe it was an old renovation, a design decision, or even a safety issue. He didn't think it mattered. That was until the first night. It began as a vibration. Low, like distant thunder, but rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat deep beneath the cabin. Alex felt it in his feet, just as he stepped out of the shower. He froze, towel dripping, staring down at the pine floorboards. Then came the voices. Faint, whispers at first. Not even words, just the suggestion of syllables. Murmurs that grew louder the longer he stood still, like the cabin was waiting for silence before it spoke. He thought it was the pipes, or maybe the wind. The place was old, after all, so he ignored it. But the next day, the sounds returned. And this time, they didn't wait for silence. They came at 3:12 a.m., a chorus of whispers drifting up through the floor. And this time, they were laughing. Not joyfully, not even human-sounding. It was distorted, like tape warped by heat. Laughter that curled upward like smoke. Alex tried recording it. He turned on his phone's mic, sat cross-legged in the dark, and waited. The moment he hit record, silence. Not a single creak, not even the wind. But the moment he hit stop, it came again, closer this time. They were toying with him. By the third night, he was barely sleeping. Coffee had replaced meals. Shadows had replaced thoughts. And on the floor, near the bricked-off stairs, he found a hatch. It had been hidden beneath the rug, the kind of trapdoor you'd never find unless you were looking. Rusted iron handle, padlocked shut, but more than the sight of it was what was written into the wood. Not carved, burned. One word. Listen. He left the cabin that afternoon, packed everything, slammed the door, threw his duffel into the back of his Jeep, only to find his keys weren't in his pocket. He searched the car, the porch, the bedroom, even the fridge. Finally, something compelled him to check the floorboards. And there they were, placed neatly beside the hatch, as if someone or something wanted him to stay. That night, he couldn't help it. He lay on the wooden floor, ear pressed against the boards above the hatch. And for the first time, the voices weren't random. They said his name. Not once. 13 times. Each whisper more clear than the last. By the final one, he felt warm breath against his cheek. He bolted upright. The house was still, the fire dead. But in the reflection of the black TV screen, he saw something behind him. Something standing over the hatch. He turned. Nothing. But when he looked back at the screen, it was closer. The thing was, Alex wasn't hallucinating. He wasn't sleep-deprived, and he wasn't dreaming. Because when he checked his phone the next morning, his voice memos app had a new file. One he hadn't recorded. It was only 17 seconds long. He hit play. Do you hear them too? The voice wasn't his. It wasn't human either. It sounded like something mimicking a person. Like it had heard voices once and was trying to wear them like skin. He should have left. He knew it. But some part of him needed to know what was under that hatch. So he went to town, bought bolt cutters. The hardware guy didn't even ask questions, just stared at Alex like he'd seen someone marked. Back at the cabin, the air felt heavier. The woods too quiet. He cut the lock. The chain felt like dead weight. And he opened it. Nothing but stairs. Dusty, narrow, descending into black. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. One foot, then another. The doors slammed shut above him. The descent felt eternal. He couldn't even see the bottom. And the whispers? They weren't beneath him anymore. They were in the walls, breathing, humming, clicking in a rhythm that sounded almost like a lullaby. The kind of mother sings after the crib goes still. Finally, his foot hit something solid. The floor. His light swept across the room. Children's toys. Dozens of them. Wooden horses, cracked dolls, broken music boxes, all rotting in the corner. And handprints. Small, faint, all over the walls. The air turned sour. Then came the whisper. Lay down. He didn't want to, but he felt his knees buckle. The floorboards pulsed like a heartbeat. The voices crescendoed. Then everything went black. Alex woke up in his car. Engine off. Morning sun bleeding through the windshield. His duffel was in the back. His phone beside him. No texts. No calls. And the cabin? Gone. Just trees where it had stood. No foundation. No steps. Only dead grass in the shape of a rectangle. Like something had been erased. But here's the thing. That voice memo, still on his phone. 17 seconds. And when you slow it down, layer the audio, you can hear something beneath the voice. Children. Crying. Scratching. Whispering. You shouldn't have listened. And now, sometimes, When Alex walks across the floor of his apartment late at night, he feels it again, a heartbeat, right beneath his feet. And if he stands still long enough, in complete silence, he can hear them whisper his name again. Only now, they're counting down, and last night, they got to 1. The hotel room that changed every morning. They say if you ever wake up in a room that's different from the one you fell asleep in, don't move. Don't speak. Just wait. Because the room might not have changed, you might have. It began with a business trip. Ordinary. Forgettable. Jared had checked into room 207 of a small boutique hotel just off the interstate. One of those independently owned spots with vintage keys, chipping wallpaper, and a kind of charm that either felt rustic or haunted, depending on your mood. The first night was uneventful. He watched late-night TV, fell asleep to static, and woke up at 7:12 a.m. sharp, feeling oddly refreshed. But something was off. The painting above the bed had changed. It wasn't just that it was a different painting. It was that the nails in the wall hadn't moved. The dust outline still formed a perfect rectangle. But now, instead of a faded watercolor of a lighthouse, it was a stark black and white photo of an empty hallway. He chalked it up to hotel staff or maybe faulty memory. Maybe he just hadn't looked that closely before. He was tired. Traveling does that. But the next morning, it wasn't just the painting. The carpet had changed color, from wine red to deep green. The lampshade was missing. The hotel directory on the desk no longer had a logo. In fact, it didn't mention the hotel name at all. Just a single typed sheet. Welcome to your stay. Please do not question the changes. Jared laughed it off, uneasily. Maybe it was a theme. An immersive experience. These boutique hotels sometimes had quirky hooks. But the staff didn't seem amused when he asked. The woman at the front desk tilted her head, like a dog hearing a strange sound, and simply said, "Room 207? That one's been unpredictable." He tried to switch rooms, but they told him the rest of the hotel was booked. Strangely, he hadn't seen any other guests. Not in the lobby, not in the elevator, not in the halls. By the third morning, the bed was on the opposite side of the room. He froze. Not only had the furniture moved, but the window was gone. And there was something new on the bathroom mirror, a smear of condensation, like someone had breathed on the glass and traced a finger through the fog. Stay still. That day, Jared didn't leave the room. He sat on the floor with his back to the door, heart pounding, staring at the walls like they might blink. And as night fell, he tried something different. He set up his phone to record, left it on a nightstand, let it capture everything as he slept. But when he reviewed the footage the next morning, the video cut out at exactly 3:07 a.m. Just static. The same static he heard that first night. And then the recording resumed at 4:44 a.m. Only now, the camera was facing the ceiling. And in the faint reflection of the TV screen across the room, he could see a shadow that wasn't his. It stood by the bed, watching him. The figure never moved, never touched anything, just watched. And that morning, the room was pristine again. Back to normal, except the hallway photo on the wall now showed a silhouette standing in the distance. And every day after, that silhouette got closer. He tried sleeping in the closet, on the floor, in the bathtub. He left all the lights on, the TV running, music playing from his phone. But the room still changed, sometimes subtly, sometimes not. Once, he woke to find the doorknob missing. Another morning, the clock had no hands. Another still, the mirror reflected a version of the room that was not the same one he stood in. His reflection was screaming, silently, pounding from the other side. Then came the sixth night. He didn't sleep at all, just sat up, eyes bloodshot, waiting for something, anything. And when the clock struck 3:07, the TV flickered on. Static again. But beneath the static, he could hear a voice. A child's voice. Whispering. "Do you remember what you did?" Jared didn't. But the voice repeated it again and again. "You forgot. You forgot. You forgot." And then silence. The next morning, the hallway photo was now just black. That's when Jared realized something else. Room 207 didn't just change around him. It was changing him. His reflection had started to lag behind. A full second off. Then two. His voice on recordings sounded deeper, warped. His dreams were bleeding into waking life. He'd see people walking past his window who weren't there, hear knocks on the bathroom tiles, and sometimes the water in the sink would run red before turning clear. One night, in a moment of desperation, Jared booked a new hotel across town and fled room 207 entirely. But when he checked in and entered his new room, room 306, it had the same carpet, same mirror, same hallway photo. Only now, the silhouette in the picture was right at the foreground, facing the camera, wearing his clothes. He checked out that same hour, drove out of town, didn't look back. But when he got home, he found his apartment had changed too. Not all at once, just the little things. The angle of a door frame, the shape of the light switch. The paint smelled fresher, but he hadn't painted. And on the living room wall, a new photo had appeared. It was a long hotel hallway. At the very end of it stood a man. He swore it looked just like the front desk clerk from that boutique hotel. Only now he was smiling. Wide. Too wide. Jared doesn't stay anywhere longer than one night now. He travels constantly, checks the mirrors twice, keeps every light on, doesn't sleep much, and every morning he takes a picture of his room before he blinks, just to make sure it's the same one he fell asleep in. He never stays still, because he's afraid if he ever does, the room will decide he's ready. And this time, the changes won't stop at the walls. I was flying into Denver on a red-eye, bleary-eyed and bone-tired, only in town for 2 days for a conference. The rental car place was nearly empty, just a single attendant and rows of quiet, glistening cars under flickering halogen lights. Mine was waiting in space 47, midnight black, freshly washed, and already idling like it had been expecting me. I noticed it as soon as I sat down. The faint smell, metallic and sweet, like rust and old flowers. It wasn't overpowering, just strange, lingering. The kind of scent that doesn't belong in a clean car. I chalked it up to engine oil or maybe leftover food, didn't think much of it. I threw my suitcase in the back seat and drove out into the cold mountain night. The first weird thing happened halfway to the hotel. I was stopped at a red light. No cars, no people, just wind. That's when the car gave a soft jolt, like something shifted in the trunk. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but the windows were tinted too dark to see anything. I told myself it was probably just the spare tire. But that noise wasn't mechanical. It sounded soft, organic, like something moved. At the hotel, I hesitated before grabbing my suitcase. The smell had intensified. In the trunk, something about it seemed off. I opened the back door, reached across, and shut it quickly, not daring to look behind. I figured I'd deal with it in the morning. That night, I dreamed of tapping. Rhythmic, deliberate, like knuckles gently rapping against a hollow metal wall. I woke up at 3:13 a.m. with my hands clammy and chest tight. The room was silent. The car key fob sat on the nightstand. And yet, I swore I heard the trunk click. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling. I didn't go to the conference. I just drove, mindlessly, through back roads and empty suburban streets. Every turn of the wheel, every stoplight, I felt like I was being watched. Not from outside, from inside the vehicle. Around noon, I stopped at a gas station. A tiny, forgotten place with broken pumps and sun-bleached advertisements. I stood beside the car, staring at the trunk. It didn't make sense, but I had to know. I opened it. At first, I thought it was empty, just a black void of carpeted space. But then I saw the fabric, jammed into the corner. It was old, lace-trimmed. A piece of dress, yellowed like parchment. Then the smell hit full force. Sweet, rotten, floral. Something had died in here. Not recently, but not long ago either. I stepped back, ball rising in my throat. But curiosity, it's a sickness. I leaned back in and peeled away the side panel. Underneath was a compartment, and inside it a photo. A little girl, 6, maybe 7, blonde hair, a bright red dress, and a gap-toothed smile. The picture looked old but not ancient. Printed recently. It was bent like someone had held it too tightly. I flipped it over. A date. 3 weeks ago. And a single word written in black pen. Returned. I shut the trunk. Slammed it. My hands were shaking. My chest wouldn't stop pounding. I told myself to call the rental company. Or the police. or someone. But I didn't. I just drove back to the hotel, parked the car, left it there, and took an Uber to the airport, my flight be damned. But the story didn't end there. A week after I got home, I got a call from a blocked number. When I answered, no one spoke. But I heard something. 3 soft knocks. Pause. 3 more. I hung up. The next day, my neighbor asked if I had gotten a new car. I told her no. She pointed to the curb. Parked in front of my house was a black sedan. Same make, same model, same dark-tinted windows. Its engine was idling. I called a rental company. They had no record of me ever picking up that car. My booking had apparently been canceled due to a system error. I checked my card. No charges. I even called the airport location. No one remembered me. It was as if that car had never existed. But I still had the photo. I locked it in a drawer. That night, the drawer was open. The photo gone. But a new one was in its place. Same girl. Same red dress. But this time, she wasn't smiling. She was looking right at me. Eyes wide. Mouth slightly open. As if she'd just realized something. The back of the new photo. A fresh date. Yesterday's. And a new word. Borrowed. I don't sleep well anymore. Because every night I hear tapping. From the walls. From the closet. From somewhere deeper. And the scent, that sweet, wilting metallic scent, it's back. I haven't seen the car again. But sometimes when I pass by reflective surfaces, I see the red dress. Standing just behind me. And once, in a mirror above my bed, I saw the trunk open. And something climb out. Evan LaRue had been a wilderness tour guide in Washington State for nearly 12 years. Skilled, certified, and obsessed with forestry, he knew the Olympic National Park like the back of his hand. Tourists loved him. Locals respected him. And yet, in June of 2019, during what should have been a routine 3-hour forest loop with 5 guests, Evan vanished without a trace. The guests returned. Evan didn't. The Rangers launched a full-scale search. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers. No blood. No signs of struggle. His GPS radio was found neatly clipped to a log. His backpack was zipped and untouched. His footprints ended exactly 27 feet from a section of old-growth trees, nicknamed the Cathedral. That's where the story really begins. Guests on that tour gave conflicting testimonies. 2 of them, retired teachers from Oregon, swore Evan was cheerful and attentive the whole time. But another hiker, a woman named Camille, recalled something different. She said Evan paused just before they reached the cathedral, stared at the trees too long. His face went pale. He whispered they changed it. When asked what he meant, Evan didn't answer. He just walked ahead, straight into the grove, faster than before. He kept glancing behind, but not at the group, as if something was following. Later, Camille said there was something off about the trees in that section. The sound of birds stopped. The moss was wet, though it hadn't rained. One of the trees looked like it had a face, slanted knots forming a kind of crooked smile. She assumed it was a trick of the mind. That assumption didn't hold when the group took a break for water. Evan told them to stay put, that he heard a tree fall and needed to check for blockage on the trail. He walked past the tree line and never returned. 15 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. They searched and shouted his name. One of the men claimed he heard a whisper, not a voice, but the woods themselves saying, "Turn back." The guests eventually made their way out by following trail markers. When they reported the event, authorities suspected Evan either suffered a sudden injury or ran off. But those theories crumbled when a park camera, located far from any public trails, captured a brief, blurry clip at 5:32 p.m. the same day. It shows Evan walking fast, lips moving like he was talking to someone. Then he stops, tilts his head, turns around. The last frame is burned into the memory of every ranger who saw it. Evan's eyes, wide with confusion, and behind him, something just barely visible. A tall, almost humanoid figure, wrapped in branches and bark, indistinguishable from the trees, except for the fingers, which were clearly moving. The footage was dismissed publicly as inconclusive, but internal ranger memos, leaked in 2020, revealed something darker. That grove, the cathedral, had been flagged 3 separate times in the past decade for unusual EM readings and unauthorized ritual activity. One note, written in 2015, warns, mark and avoid southeast quadrant, tree shift observed. Shadows move independently. Do not engage if humming begins. Evan's family was told none of this. They were given his badge, an apology, and a vague explanation about natural disorientation. But Evan wasn't disoriented. He knew that forest better than anyone. 6 months after his disappearance, Camille posted a blog recounting her experience. She included a strange detail she hadn't shared with authorities. The night after the tour, she had a dream. In it, Evan was standing in the woods, roots winding up his legs. He tried to scream, but his mouth was sealed with bark. In the background, trees slowly bent toward him, as if listening. When she woke up, her feet were muddy. A Reddit user, claiming to be a former park ranger, commented anonymously on her blog a week later. He said the cathedral was never supposed to be on the tour route, that the forest there was part of an ancient logging territory abandoned in the 1800s after too many workers went missing. He also said something else. There's a theory some of us had, that certain groves act like traps. Not all the time, just when they want to. The post was deleted 24 hours later, but not before other readers began sharing stories. Of a boy in 1992 who wandered into the same area and came back mute. Of hikers hearing footsteps behind them that stopped whenever they turned. Of missing time, entire hours vanished without explanation. One story stood out. A woman named Rachel claimed her grandfather had been a guide in the 70s. He only led one tour near the cathedral before quitting forever. He told her, the trees rearranged themselves. I mapped it, I measured it, and they moved. To this day, Evan's body has never been found. No signs of struggle, no clothing, nothing. But every year, around June, hikers report strange things. Low-frequency hums that seem to come from the earth itself. Trees that feel like they're watching. And once, a small group claimed to see a man in a torn forest ranger jacket standing still between the trunks. When they called out to him, he turned, and his face was completely blank. No eyes, no mouth, just wood. Some believe Evan is still alive, transformed, maybe even consumed by whatever lives beneath that grove. Others think he was chosen, that he saw something he wasn't supposed to, something ancient, something the forest keeps for itself. And then there's one final detail, the one almost no one knows. In Evan's field notes, found back at the station, there's a journal entry from 3 days before his disappearance. It reads, there's a part of the forest that doesn't match the maps anymore. I don't remember leading people there before, but somehow the trail always points back. I hear humming when I'm alone. I think I've passed the same tree 3 times, and today it looked like it smiled at me. It was supposed to be a quiet retreat. Travis and Elena, newly engaged, exhausted from the chaos of city life, wanted solitude. They wanted pine trees, creaky floorboards, and morning coffee with birdsong instead of sirens. The vacation home they found in northern Vermont looked perfect, a weathered colonial tucked at the edge of the forest, far from the main road. The listing described it as rustic with history, but fully modernized, Wi-Fi, heating, kitchen. A cozy escape. It had 5 bedrooms, but when they arrived, the agent casually mentioned, it's technically 6. One just doesn't open. Always been that way. Elena loathes it. Thought it was some old quirk of the house, maybe a bricked-up chimney closet or faulty doorframe. But Travis paused. He asked if the owners had ever opened it. The agent simply said, some doors stay shut. You'll be fine. That should have been the first warning. They unpacked, settled in. Day 1 was peaceful. Day 2, quiet, except for the crows that circled the backyard every afternoon. On day 3, around midnight, Elena woke up, not from a dream, but from a sound of breathing. Not Travis's. This was slower, heavier, like something exhaling right beside the wall behind their bed. She turned on her phone flashlight. Nothing there. Travis didn't even stir. The next morning, she shrugged it off. Maybe the old plumbing or her imagination. But then they noticed something strange. Every morning, a thin line of sawdust appeared under the door of the locked bedroom. like something was scratching at the floor from the inside. They assumed rodents, but there was never any other sign. No droppings, no smells, no sounds in the walls. Just that powdery trail. Fresh, every morning. By day 4, Travis was curious. Too curious. He tried to pick the lock, but it wasn't a regular lock. It was a large, old-fashioned brass mechanism with no visible keyhole. Just a carved symbol on the knob. 3 concentric circles, and a dot in the middle. He Googled it. Found nothing. Elena told him to stop. "Don't mess with old things," she said. "Let it be." But that night, the atmosphere in the house changed. It was subtle, but undeniable. The air inside felt colder, heavier. The clocks on the microwave and oven reset to 3:33 a.m. All of them. The lights in the hallway flickered any time they got near the locked door. And when Travis finally put his ear to the wood, he heard music. Faint, distant music. A slow, off-key lullaby. At this point, let's pause. Because something happens in places like this. When a house becomes too old, too isolated, and too forgotten, it starts to keep secrets. Sometimes, rooms don't stay locked because no one can open them. They stay locked because something inside refuses to leave. This wasn't just superstition. The signs were stacking up. On day 5, Elena found something in the fireplace. It looked like a charred photo, fused into the brick lining. It was a family portrait, blurry and half-burned, but she could make out 6 figures, 2 parents, 3 kids, and someone else. Someone standing behind them. Taller, blurred, almost like it wasn't part of the photo, but had burned itself in later. She brought it to Travis. He didn't want to look at it. But later that night, as they ate dinner in the dim kitchen, they both heard it. The sound of something turning the locked doorknob. Not forcefully, not violently, just testing, turning, clicking, back and forth, back and forth. They didn't move, didn't speak, and after a minute, it stopped. Here's where the story shifts. On the 6th night, Travis had a nightmare. He dreamed he was standing in the hallway, outside that door. The knob was gone, the wood was split down the middle. Something inside the room whispered his name. He could feel breath on the back of his neck. And then, he woke up. He was standing in the hallway, barefoot, facing the door. He had sleepwalked, something he had never done before in his life. And in his hand was a broken tooth. Not his. That was the last straw. The couple packed up early and left on the 7th morning. Told the agent there was a pest problem. Never mentioned the door. But that night, after returning home, Elena unpacked their suitcase. And in the front pocket of Travis's duffel was a photo. A new one, crisp, untouched by fire. It showed the 2 of them, standing in the vacation home's hallway. Their faces were blank, eyes dark, and behind them, the locked door was open. Inside the room, something stood in the shadows. Tall, blurry, and it was smiling. So what was in that extra bedroom? There are theories. Some say that house once belonged to a spiritualist family in the 1920s who attempted to build a room of echoes, a sealed chamber where sound never left. They believed they could trap voices there, and maybe something else got caught. Others believe that symbol on the doorknob, the 3 circles, wasn't decoration. It was containment, a ward, a seal to keep something inside. Either way, the house never listed that 6th bedroom again. And the guests who stay there now, they all report the same thing. Every night at 3:33, they hear someone walking from inside the wall, and a doorknob turning slowly. Some doors don't open, not because we don't have the key, but because something behind it is waiting for us to try. Most resorts greet you with complimentary drinks or smiling staff. This one welcomed its guests with silence. No cell signal, no GPS coordinates, and most chilling of all, no record it ever existed, even after they left. Travis and Elena weren't spontaneous travelers. They were the kind of couple who made Google Docs for weekend getaways, checked reviews, and even packed duplicates of essentials. But after a brutal winter in New York City and a series of back-to-back losses in their family, they decided to take a break. No plans, no reservations. Just a drive north, guided by instinct and whatever roadside sign called out to them. And one finally did. On the 3rd day of their trip, after hours of winding roads and thickening fog, they saw a small, wooden sign nailed to a crooked birch tree. No lights. No arrows. Just one word. Solstice. It seemed out of place, elegant, almost handwritten, but something about it pulled them in. 5 minutes later, they found a narrow gravel road that didn't show up on Google Maps, with moss-covered stones lining either side like it had been waiting for them. Curiosity overpowered caution. At the end of the road was the resort. It didn't look abandoned. In fact, it looked pristine. A sprawling colonial-style structure surrounded by thick pine forest. Wooden balconies, white railings, a frozen lake just beyond the back garden. The kind of place you'd expect to find on a travel blog. But the parking lot was empty and the front doors, although unlocked, opened into silence. There was no front desk, no concierge, no music, not even the distant echo of other guests. But as they stood in the cavernous lobby, golden light began to filter in from high windows. A soft fireplace flickered in a room to their right, and a card on a side table simply read, "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Vale. Room 213. Elena Fronad." We didn't book this, but her name was spelled correctly. And Travis's too. They looked at each other, half expecting someone to pop out and yell surprise. But no one did, just the fire crackling gently. Room 213 was upstairs, at the far end of a long hallway. The key was already in the door. Inside, the room was warm, elegant, and fully stocked. There were slippers set by the bed, fresh robes folded neatly on the dresser, and even their favorite snacks sitting in a glass bowl. Neither of them remembered mentioning what they liked on the road. No welcome call came. No staff ever showed up. Still, they stayed, because the next morning, Travis woke up with no memory of falling asleep. The sun was already high. Elena was staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open. "I heard whispering," she said, "all night, behind the walls." That night, they tried sleeping with the lights on. At 2:13 a.m., the electricity cut out. At 2:14 a.m., the phone in the room, an antique rotary device, began to ring. Travis picked it up slowly. There was no voice, just a static hum, and a faint sound like someone dragging their fingers across wood. The static eventually turned into a voice, barely above a whisper. "Don't try to leave until the last night." They didn't sleep after that. Now here's where the story begins to fracture, because what happened over the next 3 days, neither of them could piece together. Travis began dreaming of a hallway that didn't exist in the resort. It was longer than it should have been, hundreds of doors, each one slightly ajar. From inside came sounds, some crying, some laughing, some mimicking his own voice. Elena said she kept seeing reflections that didn't match her movements. In the windows, in the lake's surface, even in the bathroom mirror. Her doppelganger would smile slightly before she did. The deeper they explored the resort, the more impossible it seemed. Hallways looped into themselves. The garden had no path back. Time bent, lunch felt like minutes, but dinner was always waiting when they returned. And guests began to appear, not like regular people, more like mannequins, sitting silently at tables, turning their heads when no one was watching. Travis swore he saw one blink backward. Elena started to unravel on the 4th day. She found a photograph in the bottom drawer of their nightstand. A family standing in front of the same resort. But the year marked was 1957, and the child in the photo looked exactly like her. Same smile, same eyes, even the same necklace she was wearing that day. That night, she begged Travis to leave. But the car wouldn't start, and the road they came in on? Gone. Just pine trees. Endless, silent pine trees. Here's the thing about the name solstice. It means sun standing still. A moment when time holds its breath. What if this place didn't trap its visitors, but copied them? Think about it. A resort with no staff, no records, no exit. A room already prepared. A photograph of someone who shouldn't exist. What if every guest that stayed there left something behind? A memory, a shadow, a version of themselves that never quite left the building. The mind fills in gaps to survive. Travis and Elena eventually stopped questioning things. They walked through the resort like they belonged. They stopped trying to leave. The food always appeared. The towels were always warm. But Elena began writing. Every day, in a journal she found in a drawer. She wrote down what they did, what they remembered, what changed overnight. One day, she woke up and found her own handwriting had changed. Not gradually. Overnight. The loops were tighter, the slant reversed. It wasn't hers. And yet, the entries were still accurate. On the seventh day, the door to their room was gone. Just a wall where it used to be. The same wallpaper, seamless. That night, they both heard it. Dozens of voices outside the window, whispering in unison. Checkout is permanent. Travis tried smashing the window. It didn't break. The last thing Elena wrote in the journal, we were the only ones who thought we were visiting. But I think we were always part of the resort. It just waited until we arrived to let itself in. And no one's heard from them since. The resort? Still not on any map. Still not in any database. Still waiting for the next lost couple to take the wrong turn into the trees. We passed 3 towns that night. None of them had streetlights. But the fourth one wasn't on any map. And it was glowing. It started with a detour. Not the accident ahead kind, but a strange, sudden voice from the GPS. A voice that wasn't the default. It calmly said, rerouting for safer conditions. We were driving back from my sister's wedding. Midnight on the interstate. No rain, no traffic, just trees and the long ribbon of road. My boyfriend Evan, ever the cautious driver, obeyed the GPS. I didn't argue. It sounded legit. But 30 minutes later, we realized we hadn't seen another car in over 20 miles. The forest got denser. Pine needles blanketed the road like no one had driven here in years. Then we saw it. A rusted green sign swinging crookedly from a single post. Welcome to Dorset Falls. 1873, Bob. That's what it actually said. 3 question marks. We thought it was a joke. It wasn't. The first thing we noticed? Every house had lights on, but no one inside. We drove slowly past white picket fences and brick homes. Yellow lamplights spilled from lace-covered windows. Curtains didn't sway. Front doors stood open like mouths paused mid-sentence. But there was no movement. No voices. Not even bugs chirping. Evan said, it's like everyone just left. But it didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. We passed what looked like a post office. The sign was hand-painted, the letters warped from time. Dorset Falls Courier, always watching time. That wording stuck with me. It felt like a warning, but we kept driving. Eventually, we reached a roundabout. In the center stood a massive clock tower. 12 o'clock exactly. All 4 faces. Not moving. We both checked our phones. No signal. And both said, 12 o'clock. Evan tapped his screen. Must be stuck. Then the lights on every house flickered. Once. The same rhythm. Like a synchronized blink. He looked at me. I think we should turn back. We did. But the road behind us was different. It looked the same, but there were no turns we remembered. And now, instead of houses, it was just woods. Thick, looming woods pressing against the pavement like they were reclaiming it. We drove faster. Until a child stepped into the road. We swerved. Hit the brakes. But there was no sound, no thud, no scream. Just silence. We jumped out, hearts racing. But there was no child. No footprints. Only fog seeping from the trees. And then Evan noticed something that made my stomach drop. Our tire marks were gone. He whispered, it's like we never drove through here. I looked back toward the direction we came and froze. The clock tower. It was behind us. Exactly where we had turned around. We hadn't moved at all. Back in the car, I started flipping through the glove box, hoping for an old paper map. Instead, I found something. It was a photograph. A black and white one. Of the same roundabout. Same clock tower. But in the photo, we were in it. Standing beneath the tower. Smiling. I had never been here before in my life. I never smiled like that. Then I saw the date scribbled on the back in pencil. August 5th, 1956. Evan didn't say a word. He just backed the car up, tires screeching, trying to get us anywhere. But no matter which road we took, left, right, even through an alley, we always ended up back at the clock tower. The same houses, the same blinking lights, the same smell like dust and lilacs rotting in sunlight. Then the bells rang. Once, twice, 12 times. As the final chime echoed, all the lights in the town went out. All at once. Complete black. And then they came on again. But the houses were no longer empty. There were people, standing in the windows, just staring, not blinking, not moving, just watching. We tried yelling, honking, nothing. Then Evan whispered, "They're not watching us, they're waiting." I didn't understand what he meant until I looked down at the car's clock. It still read 12 o'clock. We were caught in some kind of loop. A place where time didn't move. Or maybe where it restarted. Every time, the bells rang. And with each ring, something shifted. We tried walking. Evan thought maybe if we left the car, we could break free. But the farther we got, the more the roads curved back on themselves. Like the whole town was folding inward. That's when I noticed it. Every window we passed, the people inside were slowly turning their heads, following us. Their eyes glazed white, like film negatives, and their mouths were open, wide and trembling, but making no sound. One of them looked exactly like me. Hair, clothes, even the scar on my chin from when I was 8. She stood behind a glass door, smiling with teeth that didn't look human. We ran. Eventually, we reached what looked like a library. Carved into the arch above, it was a phrase. The past belongs to the ones who remember. Inside, it was cold and smelled of old paper. But it was the first place we hadn't seen a single person, until we got to the main reading room. Hundreds of photos lined the walls. Every photo featured the same background, the Dorset Falls Clock Tower. Different people, different decades, some smiling, some screaming. And in the middle of the room, a mirror. On it, etched into the glass, was today's date. And 2 blank spaces. Names. Our names. I touched the glass. It was warm, like skin. Evan whispered, "This town doesn't let people leave. It just takes them." We tried smashing the mirror. Didn't crack. We tried burning the photos. They didn't catch fire. We even tried writing fake names in the blank spaces. But when we looked back, our full names had burned into the glass in cursive, as if the town already knew. Back outside, the clock began to tick again. Just once. And with that tick, everyone stepped outside. The entire town. Each person in perfect sync. Their mouths still wide open. Still soundless. Still watching. They didn't move toward us. They just stood. But the air moved. It thickened. Like memory settling. I looked at Evan. And for the first time, I wasn't sure it was still Evan. His eyes were glassy. And he whispered something that made my blood turn to ice. He said, "We shouldn't have exited." I grabbed him, shook him, screamed. But his eyes just rolled back. And he smiled like the photo version of himself. I ran. No direction. No plan. And I don't know how, but I blacked out. When I came to, I was back on the interstate. My phone buzzing. Signal restored. 2:47 a.m. Evan was gone. So was the car. So was Dorset Falls. I flagged down a passing truck. Tried explaining. He didn't believe me. Said there's never been a town around here. Just forest for miles. He dropped me at a rest stop. When I got inside, I saw a bulletin board near the bathrooms. Missing persons. 7 faces. One of them, Evan. But the photo was old. Faded. From the 1950s. The date below read, reported missing, August 5th, 1956. And the strangest part? There was an 8th photo beside it. No name. No date. Just blank space. Waiting.